It's alright. Welcome to Phil's Exclusive, and today we witnessed something surprising during a town hall meeting in New York City, where Bobi Wine was introduced and recognized as the president of Uganda. At the moment, shocked many in the audience as Bobi Wine went to narrate, moving from different corners, one door to another, seeking for international support, and he also spoke about his plans to return to home and continue the struggle for change. Remember, last time when he engaged with another meeting, of which I'm not remembering well, he vowed and said that he's going to move to different corners, engaging with different people to see how he's going to take over. And in this video, Phil's Exclusive brings to you our highlights from his powerful moment. Stay tuned in and subscribe for more exclusive updates. It says so again. In what you're going to watch today, His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu may have delivered to the fullest according to the expectations of very many Ugandans and very many people all over the world. Surprisingly, here back in Uganda, very many expect much from His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. Those from his side, I'm not talking about the opposition side, and those from the side of power. Very many people are talking about those who come in lights and talk about his next plans. His plans already has done, and very many expectations as they hope that His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu may do something special. In this, he gave them a chance and replied to very many. He said, "Oh, as you want to watch," and he also warned that his coming back may not be something minor like he has been coming back. It will be something very special. Like he went, he might also come back in the same rubber Bobi style. Like the video before we dive into this, he says so again. Let me give you what His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu delivered when he met different hundreds of supporters in the New York City.
Esteemed students and teaching community of Columbia University. My name is actually not Bobi Wine. That is a nickname that I cannot stop complaining that it overtook my real name. My real name is Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Mitembo Robert. I'm a musician, but my musical name, my stage name Bobi Wine, overtook my real name. I used to complain. I don't complain anymore because my musical name is much easier for people across the world. I visited him in prison in 2016 after he ran for president. He was rigged out and was in prison. I visited him in prison in 2016 after he ran for president. He was rigged out and was imprisoned because I hold him in very high regard. I visited him, and I remember your father's words say, "Bobi, when I was in my and folded my sleeves and got involved." Those words cut deep, and they are part of the reason why I thought that it was time for me to get in politics. Of course, I had my other reasons. I had my personal reasons that triggered me more to get involved in politics. Here we are. I'm not a young person anymore. It can't please me more to see young people involved and to see the iconic you from the icon who is right now in prison, kidnapped from Kenya, illegally brought into Uganda, put before a kangaroo military court, and is in prison now. While he's in prison, the son of the dictator in Uganda is threatening to hang him every now and then. I had to run out of my country because the military was looking for me to castrate me. So that's where we are. I say that because these are things that there are reasons that there are things that keep sparking young people to get involved. Today, young people have a bigger avenue than it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 2000s. The world is more connected. So the young people today should first and foremost realize that they are the future. Actually, the future is not tomorrow, the future is today. The young people of today are the ones that should take charge, and can take charge by leading the way, either practically getting involved or inspiring others or supporting the right causes in order to change their futures, to change the future of their countries, especially African countries. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, the context that we're speaking in is one where we can have this conversation, but this same conversation could not happen in Uganda. It couldn't happen in Makerere.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that as well. And I guess I'll ask another question that's kind of related to what you just brought up, which is, how can we organize in situations of escalating oppression, escalating political repression as well? And I think, there's always been repression in our countries. I mean, to find a period in Uganda where there hasn't been political repression, I challenge you all. If you do, everyone will be very shocked. But, it does seem like there's been some kind of change over the last several years. It seems like now, police, military, the judicial system, there's no longer a need to even pretend to uphold the law, right?
Yeah.
If the chief of the defense forces can just go on Twitter and say that he's going to execute somebody, when people are abducted and detained without any pretense of some kind of legal justification, spend years in prison without ever facing trial, right? These are things that they raise the question, why do that when there are many legal innovations that the state has implemented to actually repress people over time? So, preventative arrest was totally legal, right? All of these kind of that people were embroiled in the 2000s, all of that was totally legal, and it was like you could say well-functioning, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, why at some point do you break away from the need to even pretend to follow the law, right? And this is something that I don't think is just true of Uganda. I mean, if you look at the abduction of Maduro in Venezuela, the war of aggression in Iran, right? The norms that kind of governed political life, they don't seem to matter anymore. And in fact, more and more it's about breaking them in very visible and spectacular ways. So, how do you organize in that context, especially given the fear that it creates, the fear that people have because of the violence, and also the resources and time that it takes just to support people who are incarcerated, people who are experiencing repression? How do you kind of organize in these new circumstances?
That's a quite tough question. How do you organize? I think the first step is to be stubborn, to refuse to give up. You mentioned it that there's no longer any pretense, and it's getting worse by the day. But I also say that, and it has been written by some writers, that evil prevails not because the evil guys are strong, but because the good guys are just silent or complacent, or don't see reason to come in. In Uganda in particular, we keep going from those that are expected to do things and don't do them. When I came into politics, I did not even have a university degree. I'm the most unlikely person to be in politics. I'm a musician, and ordinarily it is the professors, the lawyers, the engineers, the intellectuals of the day that are supposed to be in politics. And I'll quote the words of your father, Dr. Besigye. You pardon me, I keep quoting him because, who else is more of an inspiration than him? Who says that the intellectuals, especially in Uganda, are the biggest disappointment and the biggest undoing of us. It is the giving up and the complacency and the silence of those that would have done them. I'm only glad that the ordinary people are now rising to the occasion. Apart from Dr. Besigye and maybe a few other elite people that are in prison, but majority of the political prisoners today in Uganda are the ordinary citizens, the taxi drivers, the barbers like Eddie Mutwe, the border riders like Machete, the hawkers like Olivia Lutaya and others. How do people, or the young people, rise to the occasion? By first and foremost being inspired and then inspiring others. By being awakened and awakening others. We in Uganda today are in a situation where political education has been banned in schools. There's no more political education. Politically sensitive radio programs have been banned. The government promotes more of sports betting and more of useless things and endeavors among the young people. So awakening the people, awakening each other is the first step, because an awakened mind will awaken others. And also organizing silently and stubbornly. We cannot say there's any safe way to organize. No, there isn't. But we organize nevertheless. So I would say it's being stubborn, going out there and facing the risk. Well knowing that, yeah, much as it's dangerous, good enough, there's corruption, and corruption helps. How does it help? It helps to see that even the regime operatives will arrest people and pick money from them, rob them, and they will let them go. So that, in a way, helps. So we, as those that stand against that oppression, organize by insisting, by keeping each other awakened, by keeping each other, motivated, and also by doing it underground. We no longer, operate in the open, we operate underground. There are various ways. I cannot point in a particular way that this is how we organize, because that gives you a way to operate. So the most direct question is being stubborn and being consistent and refusing to give up and finding any.
Yeah, thank you for that. I remember I saw Eddie Mutwe in prison the other, I think it must have been in June or something, and some of these people have been in jail really for almost 6 years now.
Yeah.
Not faced like a single trial date. I think it's something that I think about a lot. Just how do ordinary Ugandans accept that is like possible in a country that they live in, right? There's a kind of moral injury as well that people have to suffer, because that there are people who maybe you don't even know their names who are in jail sitting there, and that your silence is also your complicity somehow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask another question. This question is kind of related to the thematic. So we're here to discuss youth participation and good governance, and good governance has been a very important part of the opposition's kind of messaging and platform. This idea, and I think it's interesting. A lot of people don't know that the idea of good governance really only came into existence in the 1990s. It's like a very recent concept. And before the 1990s, many people in political science and the development community believed that there was actually a trade-off between democracy and development, right? So looking at examples like Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, Malaysia, these other Asian countries, where in fact it was like the authoritarian government that made it possible for this really rapid development, because there was no debate about how to spend money, where to invest, right? So there was this idea, in fact, that in some ways democracy is antagonistic to development. And only after the end of the Cold War in the 1990s and early 2000s, you see this rise of the idea that essentially development is equivalent to democracy, and there's like a huge influx of money, mostly from donor countries and international organizations, to promote democracy in the global south. In the 1990s, Uganda was one of I think 40 countries that wrote new constitutions. So that's like a third of the world, right? So there's this huge movement, but now it seems that the idea of good governance doesn't really have the same resonance as it once did, or it's not as, it seems like the commitment to the idea of good governance is kind of shifting, at least here, like the global north and in the west, right? If you think about the authoritarianism in Europe, or even, I'm sure you've seen the America First in Africa doctrine that the United States just announced, which basically says that, America's done promoting, universal values or democracy in Africa, and now they need to respect differences in culture, history, and politics, right? So, you guys can have your politics, it's your own culture, we can have our own kind of thing. So, it seems as though this idea of good governance, maybe it's not there's not as much of a consensus around it as there once was. So I'm curious, what does good governance mean to you? And what place does it have in a kind of politics for our current moment, right?
Yeah. Good governance means the same that it meant 100 years ago. And it will mean the same 100 years from now. Anything diverting different from that is hypocrisy. Because good governance, in my view, is accountability to the people. And I always mention it simply that good governance means targeting common good. Countries like America, Europe, and all these other democracies focus on something called common good. Here in America, common good means that regardless of how poor you are, the poverty only ends in your house. And when you walk out of your house, you're just as rich as everybody, because the common good benefits you, the good road, the good infrastructure, and everything. Unlike back home, regardless of how rich you are, your wealth ends only in your house. Once you get out, you are just as poor as anybody else. The bad infrastructure, the insecurity, and everything, That's why when you take models of countries where citizens enjoy, you'll find that there's one thing that they share in common: accountability to the people. These countries develop not because the leaders are so good, no, but because the citizens are not going to take any nonsense from the leaders. That's what we want. That's what used to bring us together as citizens of the world, as international members of the international community. The values that we all hold dear: democracy, the rule of law, respect for human rights. That is what should bring us all together. So the mention of, let us leave them do their things their way and we'll do their way, it's just an excuse to to condone corruption. I mean, they don't tell that to countries in Europe. And I always speak it, in a very complaining way, that corruption, misrule, and abuse of rights is condoned in Africa and is not condoned in Europe. For example, if what Museveni is doing in Uganda was being done by a leader in Europe, then that leader will not be in power for the next 6 months. But Museveni does it, and he can get away with it, And I think it's unfair to gauge the standard of human rights, the standard of democracy for other countries, particularly in Africa, at a lower level, and look at it as acceptable. I think it's wrong, and for lack of a better word, that is racism. So for me, I believe that the standard of good governance should be the same, whether in America or in Uganda. You cannot say, they're doing that's their version of democracy. There's no version of democracy where citizens are subjugated. There's no style or version of democracy where the people's voice does not reign supreme. In Uganda, we have elections when the internet is switched off. That is not any kind of democracy. In Uganda, we have a standard of human rights where the chief of defense forces will abduct people and torture them live on Twitter, and nothing will happen. I mean, just 2 or 3 months ago, the chief of defense forces, who is the son of the president in Uganda, killed 23 of my friends and went on internet and said, I've killed 23 of NUP hooligans, and I hope Bobi is the 24th that I've killed. Now, for any country to say, that's their version, let's just collaborate as countries, I think that is wrong. You cannot deal with tyrants as if you're dealing with legitimate leaders. So for me, I think that the standard of democracy should be the same, and we cannot start gauging them differently. I don't know if I answer your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I think just to highlight how bad things have gotten in Uganda. Sometimes like these cases of abduction and stuff, when you look into them, it's not even like some kind of like politically coordinated thing. They're trying to get some guy for doing something disruptive. Sometimes it's just plain extortion. Somebody wants to take money from another person, like the priest who was abducted in, I think in Masaka. Yeah, I mean,
that was Father Sekaria, actually.
Yes, just over basically money, over basically like some kind of local dispute over funding, and the level of insecurity. I mean, corruption is maybe even not even a strong enough word. the level of just breakdown of law and order to the point where any kind of person with a badge or a gun can go and just start abducting people. I mean, where I'm from in Castanete, you always hear stories of people in soldiers' uniforms just going and robbing people.
Oh yeah.
But you know, it's like, it's hard to really crack down on it because soldiers do the real thing, the same thing, right? So you have criminals wearing fatigues and robbing people, and soldiers also doing the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I think, yeah, just to highlight the point that you made, but I kind of want to push a bit farther on this just because I think, you know, I mean, for a lot of people in the African diaspora, also on the continent, you know, the model for what a kind of radical break with the kind of politics that we're used to could look like is really, you know, something like what Traoré is doing in Burkina Faso. And I'm going to ask this in a very delicate way. But I'm curious to know what you think about this other mode of doing politics, which does not claim to be democratic, at least in the ordinary sense, you know, of like elections, whatever. Traoré abolished political parties. That's not his mode of doing politics. But his mode is a kind of accountability that says, I speak for the entire country, you know, I respond to their needs, and I'm doing a kind of radical break with the system that was there before. And it seems to me that this is a different way of doing politics that is not, you know, some version of like electoral democracy, liberal politics that we're used to. And I'm curious to know what you think about that, and you know, what I guess what a kind of opposition politics looks like in a world where more and more people are actually excited about it and consent to forms of authoritarianism, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think about you know, advocating for the things that you're talking about, democracy, human rights, respect for law and order, in a context where so many people are actually fascinated and attracted to the rule of one?
Thank you very much. I'm against authoritarianism, even if it was Jesus who brought authoritarianism. I would be against it. I love Traoré, or rather I loved Traoré. I'm one fan of the great Thomas Sankara. I mean, we wear this red beret as inspired by Thomas Sankara, as inspired by Che Guevara and all those other revolutionaries. I loved Museveni. I've read his books, and I'm sure the Museveni of then, when he was my age, that's the reason he was able to persuade your father to join him to go and risk their lives to liberate Uganda, or do what they call liberation. However, I disagree with any leader that claims to be representing people without getting the mandate of the people. America was created out of a war that had saying no taxation without representation. You cannot claim to be representing people when you don't get their mandate. I love what Traoré says. I would love to love what he does. You know, like many people, I was fascinated when Ibrahim Traoré took over. Yeah, he claimed it was corruption, and the good words that we all love to hear. We all disagree with imperialism. We all disagree with modern day colonialism. But while we disagree with colonialism, we even disagree more with being colonized by people of our own color. You know, in this day and time, citizens should have a right, and leaders should govern in interest of their citizens and with mandate, and should be accountable to the people. So a short while ago, when Traoré had just come, I made a statement and said, yeah, I love Traoré. I support him. He's very popular. How I wish he gave the people of Burkina Faso the chance to elect him so they can feel like he's their servant and not their boss. I don't believe in bosses. As leaders, I believe in servants. So if Traoré gave the people of Burkina Faso a chance to vote him into power, then he would be their servant and not their boss. You know, but over time, of course, when he abolished the Electoral Commission, I questioned. Recently, when he dismissed democracy, oh, I was so heartbroken. And it reminds me of Museveni's great quote. Africa's problem are leaders. Africa's problem in general and Uganda's problem in particular are leaders that overstay in power. When a leader becomes all-powerful, then he's governing on his own behalf and not behalf of the people. Then the people become his subjects. They cease to be citizens, they become subjects. And that should not be anywhere in Africa or the world in 2026. So for me, I think that any leader, and I won't be dead, I know you're trying to be careful, I won't be careful because I hate to be politically correct. I would rather say it the way it is, that any leader, regardless of how sweet the words they use, should be answerable to the people. I believe in servant leadership. And anybody that governs with a gun is an oppressor. How else are people going to check him? How are they going to question him? You know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. That is how Museveni began. That is how all these other, that's how Robert Mugabe began. I was named after Robert Mugabe, you know, because he was a great revolutionary. By the time I was born, by the time he passed away, he was a despised tyrant. Now I can imagine how it's going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now in Burkina Faso. I mean, Burkina Faso produced Traore. That means there are millions of Traores in Burkina Faso. Let them be inspired by him, but let him set a good precedent where leaders are questioned by the people, are answerable to the people, and are governing according to the interests of the people. But most importantly, leaders should be subjected to the interests of the people so that people can vote you in and vote you out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a lot there in what you said. I guess I just want to ask one follow-up question, which is, you know, I think I've noticed, I don't know if you've also noticed, in Kampala, in lots of parts of Uganda actually, nowadays, you know, I'm always watching what people put on like matatus, like the images they put on matatus. Nowadays you see a lot of images of like Idi Amin, Gaddafi on matatus, Mugabe even, you know, I saw a Duka also named after Mugabe. So why do you think people are now kind of reevaluating or finding something, interesting or inspiring in these figures who we look at as, you know, this problematic thing from the past or something?
Well, that's an interesting one. You see, I grew up, I was not born in the days of Idi Amin, but I know he was a brutal dictator, or so I'm told. However, I also know that many of the roads and many hospitals and schools were built by Idi Amin. I also know that under Idi Amin, there was a crackdown on corruption. You cannot find Idi Amin's son or daughter or grandchild as a tycoon. I know that Uganda House here in New York was bought for Uganda by Idi Amin and all that. That is not in any way to wrap away the brutality that he meted on Ugandans. But I believe that people tend to romanticize the dictators of yesteryears because the current dictators are making the former dictators look like angels. I mean, Museveni is making Idi Amin look like an angel. Idi Amin ruled over Uganda for only 8 years. For all the wrongs that he did, Idi Amin was uneducated. Idi Amin did that for 8 years. Museveni has killed Ugandans for 40 years and counting. There are, in my view, and I could be wrong, there are productive dictators and there are failed dictators. Museveni is a failed dictator because besides the brutality, the corruption is at levels it has never been before. It has only been destruction. So And this is to warn us, if I or anybody from your generation was to become president, and you behave like Museveni or worse, you would make him look like an angel. So that should teach us. I don't know if I'm...
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know, I mean, I always find it so strange. But I guess I want to ask another question related to something that you talked about, which is the red beret. I guess I'm curious to know, what place you think aesthetics have in political struggle, specifically in Africa, because, from the very beginning, People Power and Loop has been very, I think, brilliant in how it uses aesthetics, how you've been able to use the color red, the formations, the different ways that you've been able to use social media as well to project certain images and to use these references or aesthetics of like other revolutionary struggles, other popular struggles to animate your movement. So I'm curious to, and also of course music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Music being the other big one. So I'm curious to know how you think about the relationship between aesthetics and politics in contemporary African politics and what role aesthetics has in that,
Thank you. I'm an artist. Did you tell them I'm a musician? A good one. I'm an artist, and maybe that's where art comes in handy. We read history and we pick the things that inspire us in history. Of course, many people have used this red beret. They have had their mistakes, but there have been great things about them. People like Che Guevara, selflessness and all that. People like Thomas Sankara, unfortunately, or fortunately, he lived so long, so we only know the good things. Many times I imagine if Jesus Christ lived up to 75, So we are able to pick the good things and the artistic things from that. Just like music played a huge role in the struggles, during the days of slavery, during the days of colonialism, during the days of fighting against apartheid, fighting against dictatorships. And today, the same way aesthetics do the same. Now we use this red beret and the style in which we confront the dictatorship. We are non-violent militants. That's why you hear us calling ourselves foot soldiers. We are soldiers, non-violent soldiers. We are fighting non-violently. And the way we dress, the way we carry ourselves, the way we speak communicates as we confront what is wrong. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's one of the most beautiful things about your movement and about our movement is how much great music we have from it. My mom, her favorite song of yours is Chadenga, which everyone should listen to if they have time. It's really good. So okay, I'll just ask some questions from the audience. They submitted some questions in advance, and then we can move into question and answer because I'm sure many of you have your own questions. So, okay, one question from the audience is, basically, how can the international community outside of Uganda contribute to the Ugandan struggle? What can they do besides amplifying your message and advocacy? So what kind of new pressure can be applied on the regime, basically, from people who are sympathizers and people who are outside of the country? And I'd be interested to know, in light especially of the new proposed national sovereignty bill, what you think is still possible.
The international community, how can they contribute to our freedom struggle by not contributing to our oppression? You see, dictatorships all the way from history have always gotten their strength from the international community. Today, for decades, Museveni has been getting a lot of money. In the recent years, Museveni was getting up to $1 billion from the US government in terms of in form of military cooperation and others from the US. But this very money has always been the money that is used to subjugate us. 2018, I had my drive. I was supposed to be a dead man. They shot at my car and killed my driver. They used an American gun. You know. So what we, and indeed this in many ways has always been turned around on us. For example, when I ran away from death, from back home, I did not go to Kenya or Tanzania, Sudan or any country nearby because the dictator in Uganda has his long hand stretched into all these countries. I ended up in America. Unfortunately, the regime propagandists always pulled out their Pan-African card and say, oh, how can you run to the land of the colonialists? How can you go run to the land of imperialists? You're an agent of the imperialists. And yet, in reality, they are the agents of the West. So what we ask of the international community is to stand by the values that they profess, is to not be the support system for the oppression, is to hold the regime in Uganda and other oppressive regimes in Africa and the world to the same standards of other democracies. To know that if what the dictatorship in Uganda is unacceptable according to their values, then they should not be funding it. They have laws that, like the Global Magnitsky, that they can evoke, that they've evoked elsewhere. When Taylor did what Museveni did, he was sanctioned. When Mugabe did what Museveni is doing, he was sanctioned. And all other countries. Why then are they not sanctioning Museveni? They should not put diplomacy above democracy. They should not put business above values. You know, we can relate in terms of trade and all this. If they want our minerals, if they want our wealth, it can be on a moral ground and not in exchange of keeping a dictatorship in power. That has always been our ask. That is our ask to today. I mean, Dr. Besigye is in prison. He shouldn't be in prison. You know, there should be questions like that. We have thousands of political prisoners in prison without a crime. Many people are missing. Today, as we speak, the wife of my personal political assistant was abducted and kept in Muhozi. Muhozi, for the information, is a son of General Museveni, who is the president of Uganda and is the chief of defense forces. He will pick anybody's wife from their home and keep him under his basement for as long as he wants. He kept the wife of my personal assistant for 37 days. There's a young lady who's a TikToker called Blue Tick. Up to now, she was picked up and she's being kept in his basement. He does all this and gets away with it. And the following day, or days later, he's standing in an official picture with either an ambassador from a renowned democracy or a diplomat. I think that's wrong. I think America and the developed world should not be partners in crime with dictators like Museveni. That is our ask. That is what they can do. We are not asking them to come and save us. We're asking them to stop sponsoring our operation and to stop being part of our pain. Or else we see them as partners in crime. Now to the American citizens and citizens of the world, all we ask of them is to keep their eyes, to give us some attention. We appreciate the attention that they give to the world, the attention that they give to Ukraine. I personally went to Ukraine, to see what's happening there. The same attention they give to Ukraine, they should give to Congo. They should give to Uganda. They should give to Sudan. More people are killed in Congo than in Ukraine and Gaza combined. So they should give us attention. They should. I saw people here, our brothers and sisters, the black people in America, with the campaign Black Lives Matter. I wish they would also say African Lives Matter, because I think we matter too. Yeah. So give us your attention. And indeed, that's what brings us here, to seek your attention, to be able to highlight our plight. And if you permit me, I'll also use this opportunity to challenge you, the young people. I mean, Columbia University is an amazing university. For me, from what I've read, I know all these great leaders in Africa and the world have come here. The Kwame Nkrumahs, the Obotes, the Nyereres and others. They've been here. You are the Nyereres of today. You are the Nkrumahs of today. You are our hope. So rise to the occasion. There's a reason why God, if you believe in him or her, there's a reason why God picked you up to bring you here. If you don't utilize that for the benefit of the millions of us that are home, you will be a loss. Thank you.
Thank you.